What is the best Dark Knight film? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Untitled Productions. Today I'm going to be reviewing every Dark Knight film and deciding which is the best and which is the worst. Before I start the video, guys, if you're not already subscribed to Untitled Productions, then click the link in the description or the button in the outro. We do movies, sports, and all kinds of stuff on this channel, so if that's something you would like, then subscribe. Anyway, let's get into it. Basically, how this is going to work is I'm going to be going through every Dark Knight film. I'm going to be going over the good, the bad, and then giving it a score out of 10. Let's get started. Batman Begins is the first of the Christopher Nolan Batman franchise and is basically depicting Bruce Wayne's journey to becoming Batman and his battle with Scarecrow and his mentor, Ra's al Ghul. And honestly, I really like this movie. I used to view this as one of the weakest superhero movies out there, but upon a recent viewing, I really enjoyed it. Christian Bale is the best possible Batman portrayal in my opinion. His acting is great in this movie and really in all three movies. I really believe that he is Bruce Wayne and Batman more than I do Ben Affleck or Michael Keaton or anybody else really. Ra's al Ghul is the second best villain in the franchise, and we'll get to who's number one later. I buy Bruce and Rachel's romance, even though it's not as good as the other films. This film has a lot of good and not much bad. Let's start out with the worst part of this movie, which is the overall storyline. This movie has to focus so much on Bruce Wayne becoming Batman that it can't just have fun with the characters and story. This leads to the story of this movie feeling kind of weak compared to the other films, and I don't buy how high the stakes are with the two villains. Speaking of the villains, that point goes hand in hand with the other thing I don't really like, which is Scarecrow. The acting of Cillian Murphy in this role is good, but the character isn't that good a villain, and his plan doesn't really convey any worry or emotion out of me. Commissioner Gordon in this movie isn't nearly as great as he is in the other movies, but I guess his role wasn't as prominent, so I can't hold that against it. Overall, this movie is a lot of fun, and while it may not live up to the movie that comes after it, it's still a really good movie. I'd give it an 8.6 out of 10. Lots of fun to be had, but some weak points in the plot and movie. The Dark Knight was the sequel to Batman Begins and the middle film in the trilogy. It details Bruce Wayne's battle against the Joker while also struggling with the romance between Golden Boy Harvey Dent and his love interest Rachel Dawes. And speaking of her, the first good thing I'll talk about is the casting change, with Maggie Gyllenhaal taking over for the Rachel character. Katie Holmes wasn't necessarily bad in this role, but Gyllenhaal is definitely a massive step up in this movie. The acting is phenomenal in this movie from everybody. Heath Ledger is the standout actor as Joker, and Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman, and pretty much everybody else in this movie makes a top-notch portrayal of their characters. I mean, even the dude who plays the insane guy from Arkham Asylum is really good. The Dark Knight revolutionized superhero movies by taking the dark, psychological road rather than making it practically a comedy. Other superhero movies have tried to recreate this, but it's really just created movies that don't come close to the level of The Dark Knight. So, the villain, Joker, is amazing, Batman is amazing, everybody is amazing, the action in this movie is amazing, the plot is 10 times better than Batman Begins, everything is amazing. I honestly don't have anything bad to say about this movie. It is perfectly crafted and is about as close to perfect as a movie can get. I really don't see anything wrong with this film. With everything I've said about this movie, whether how amazing everything is or the lack of flaws in this film, I'm gonna have to give it a 10 out of 10. Now just saying, that's only the second movie I've ever given a 10 out of 10 with my ranking scale, so you know that The Dark Knight is awesome. Then came the last movie in the trilogy, where Bruce Wayne has gone into hiding after his alter ego, Batman, became the villain after taking the blame for Harvey Dent's death. While Batman has been in hiding, a new villain called Bane has been scheming a plan to basically turn Gotham into one of the Purge movies. The Dark Knight Rises has a lot of good, though noticeably less than the previous film. Christian Bale is great as always. I really think Michael Caine does a great job with the parts he's in as Alfred, and Gary Oldman returns as Commissioner Gordon. And they got Tom Hardy, who's starring in one of my most anticipated upcoming movies, to sign on as Bane. Plus they got Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I think that The Dark Knight had better acting with the B-list actors that they had, but The Dark Knight Rises has an all-star cast. So, obviously, the acting in this movie is great. The movie tries to recreate the psychological aspect of the previous film and succeeds to an extent. The action in this movie is great, which we come to expect from these films, and the villains are really good. There is a lot of fun and good things to be found in this movie. Now on to some of the things I didn't like. The main thing I don't like is the villain reveal at the end of the movie. I understand that for the plot to work, this is where it has to be, but it just didn't feel as dramatic as it should have. Plus, it was pretty predictable. Like, the level of predictability of Ego being the main villain in Guardians 2. I also think that the love interest between Miranda Tate and Bruce Wayne was overdone way too much, and while I won't go into detail, it kinda takes some of the Dark Knight-esque feel out of the movie. Not a lot of bad to be found here, but still a good bit. While I don't hate this movie like a lot of people do, it definitely isn't the ending we deserve to such a great franchise. While yes, it wasn't as great as it should have been, I think that The Dark Knight was so good that it built up our expectations too high for this movie. That being said, I'm going to give this movie a 7.9 out of 10. It isn't a bad movie by any means, but certainly isn't the best ending we could have gotten to the Dark Knight trilogy. Now I decide what order I'd put these in from best to worst. If you've been counting at home, you know that The Dark Knight Rises got the lowest score with 7.9 out of 10. And while this isn't going off with just score, I do think it is the worst Dark Knight movie. Coming in at number 2 with an 8.6 out of 10 is Batman Begins. This movie is significantly better than The Dark Knight Rises and is one of the best superhero origin stories out there. It definitely earned the second spot. And at first place with a perfect score of 10 out of 10 is The Dark Knight. This movie is so great, probably one of my top 10 movies of all time. I know it's Caleb's favorite movie of all time. It balances dark and grim with exciting action to give us one of the best superhero movies of all time. It is, by far, the best Dark Knight movie. Also, Caleb pointed out that there's not an H in The Dark Knight, so yeah, I'm bad at spelling.